everybody, and welcome to this week's webinar. I am so excited to welcome every single one of you, and thank you so much for joining us. I know that we're going to start right at 1 o'clock today, just because we have so much information to cover with our panelists. But let me go ahead and introduce you to a couple of different housekeeping rules here before we really dive in and do some introductions from our panelists joining us today. But make sure to set your chat pane to everyone. Zoom likes to be tricky and not always want to make it available for everyone to speak with one another. We love being collaborative here and sharing ideas and questions and things like that. So please feel free to make sure that is set to everyone. This session will be recorded and the recap will be sent out tomorrow. So if for some reason you do need to leave early or would like to send this to someone else on your team, you're in luck. There will be a link sent out tomorrow to where they can watch it. And lastly, we are so glad that you're here. Again, my name is Kelly Cristaldi, and I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Virtuous. And I am joined today by my lovely friends, Vance Roosh and also Stuart Entwistle. Stuart hopefully will be here quite soon, but we do have Vance here. Vance, it's so good to see you. I always love speaking with you. Why don't you tell the other fine folks on today's webinar a little bit more about yourself and Overflow?
Thank you so much, Kelly. It is such an honor to be on here. We love Virtuous. We are a proud partner of Virtuous, and Kelly, you and your whole team have been amazing. Overflow is really simple. We're a giving platform that makes it really easy for 501c3s, nonprofits, charitable organizations to receive non-cash assets, specifically assets such as stock, mutual funds, IRAs, 401ks, as well as cryptocurrency. And we're going to be talking about all that today. So great to be here.
Yeah, we are so thankful to have you here. And Stuart, it seems like might be having a couple of technical issues to join us today, which is completely fine. But just for the sake of time, because y'all have provided us with a lot of really great information. And I know that our attendees are eager and excited to hear more about how they can increase their donors' generosity through wealth screening and stock gifts, which I am super excited to be covering as well. Stuart Entwistle is our Senior Director of Enterprise Sales at DonorSearch. DonorSearch is a wonderful partner of ours, just like Overflow is. And they're the ones that help power the wonderful wealth data engine behind our platform. So they are a wonderful partner, just like yourself, Vance. It is truly a pleasure to have everyone join us today. But in the sake of getting into the meat of things, we do have a quick agenda to go over first. What we're going to cover today in our session is first and foremost, the importance of accepting stock gifts. We hear about it. We know, yeah, accepting stock gifts is important. It's, something we should be considering as part of our fundraising strategies, but why is it so important? So we're going to be talking a little bit more in detail about that. We're also going to go into 4 steps to implementing stock gifts at your organization. Nothing makes me happier to go to a webinar and go, oh yeah, great, perfect. We're going to get like really juicy key takeaways, like the 1, 2, 3s of how we're going to implement this. So we're definitely going to go into all of that. We'll carry that through some key takeaways. And of course, at the end of the day session, we will have time to answer your questions. But I will like to say this. If at any moment of time today you have a negative, an idea, a question, please feel free to go ahead and drop that into the chat pane. That way we can address it on certain slides if it pertains to that information, or we may just get to it later depending on time. So to kick us off, let's see here. We're going to talk first a little bit why accepting stock gifts really is so important. And again, we hear this a lot as fundraisers. I'm a former fundraiser myself. I was in the animal welfare space for a number of years, and stock gifts was kind of this thing, to put it for lack of a better term. We focused a lot of our fundraising on traditional strategies, one-to-one, donor, relationship and cultivation. I handled a lot of our corporate sponsorships, working with bigger brands in our community to help support our efforts. But stock gifts were never really on our radar. We really relied on your traditional forms like cash and checks and different types of sponsorships that way. But stock gifts are really critical and can really help your organization take your generosity from your supporters to the next level. And accepting gifts of stock should really be a top priority for your nonprofit's development team. And we've got a couple stats here down below to really paint the picture as to why that's so key. The average stock gift is worth $5,000, which at any organization, typically $5,000 is when that's considered a major gift. Could you imagine just doing your job? You're starting to put more effort into stock gifts. You're cultivating these really great relationships. And then suddenly somebody's like, actually, yeah, I am going to do a stock gift of $5,000. That $5,000 really is life-changing for most organizations. You can put it towards really great programs. You can perhaps build a new house. You know, if you're a Habitat for Humanity, maybe that's building like 2 new homes, or it's able to like upgrade certain appliances. There's just a wealth that can happen just out of that single act of generosity. And research also shows that up to 80% of donors own appreciated assets like stock, but only 20% actually donate that asset. We're still relying on really traditional methods for donations, when really that 80%, wow, that's a huge number, and only 20% of them are actually going to be giving that asset away. And then stock gifts are actually really tax savvy ways for donors to give and have the potential to become recurring donations. And we're going to get a little bit more into the tax side here in a couple slides and why it's so important. But these are just a couple stats to kind of wet your whistle per se. So what type of stocks can be donated? Of course, there are tons of stocks out there. We've got publicly traded, we've got privately held, and we have mutual funds. But all of these different types of stocks can actually be donated to your organization. Here we see that publicly traded stocks are one of the most frequently donated non-cash assets because they're very widely known and they're at publicly known prices, which is great. I know that I have some publicly traded stocks. Most of my friends partake in it. I'm sure that y'all do in your own personal lives, but many of us, at least at some point or another, dabbled in public traded stocks. It's quite the new venture for us. I think it's quite exciting. But then on the flip side of that, we have privately held stocks, and these often have significant higher values, but require independent appraisals to determine their fair market dollar values. So while publicly traded stocks, we know the prices, we know what they're worth. Privately held, there's just a little bit more math, there's a little bit more research that needs to go into it to determine that fair market dollar value. And these are typically a type of stock offered exclusively by a private company to its employees and to its investors. And then, of course, we have mutual funds, which is also fairly common and we hear a lot about, especially nowadays. These are risk mitigating bundled stocks, and they're a very popular option amongst traders and investors. I'm sure we all know what mutual funds are. We hear it as quite the buzzword in today's marketplace. But these are really the 3 biggest type of stock gifts that we see given to organizations. And here's where it really is why it's so important for donors. We know why it's important for us as an organization. It's going to increase our ability to provide certain services, expand programs, maybe even offer certain new opportunities that's been on our wish list for a long time. But why is it important for the donor? Well, here's where we're going to bring in a little bit of that tax capital gain knowledge that we kind of alluded to a couple of slides ago. And actually donating stock really allows donors to bypass capital gains taxes that they would otherwise need to pay instead if they sold the stock to donate the cash to allow them to maximize their gift. And the thing is too, capital gains can actually take up 37% on the appreciated value. And here's where I'm going to stop because our very good Stuart is here and he's actually going to help us talk a little bit more through the nitty-gritty of the tax side of all of this. Let's see here. Hi, Stuart. It's so good to see you.
And my apologies, my computer was just acting up at all the wrong time, but I'm happy to pick up and thank you for covering for me while I was getting my computer issues taken care of. So it sounds like you were covering the capital gains tax part of it?
Absolutely were, and I would love it if you could jump in and talk about capital gains for everybody.
Yeah, so capital gains is really connected to the increase in value of a particular stock from the time that you purchased it to the time that you actually sell it. And so if there's an increase in value, say you purchase a stock for $10 a share and you sold it for $50 a share, you would have to pay capital gains on that difference between the 10 and the 50. And it can be as much as you can see on the slide, 37%. So again, getting back to what Kelly probably spoke about a little bit, is that by giving stock, what the donor benefits from primarily is that they get the full value of the stock as of the day that they transfer it to the organization, but they don't pay that tax, and they get the full benefit, tax benefit of the value of the shares of that day. Also, when you look at these two together, you can see that there's some significant tax savings for the donor. Right. Next. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of stock for nonprofits. So there are just so many. It really can encourage a donor to actually think about raising the level of the gift that they might be giving, because as opposed to writing a check, for instance, out of their checkbook, which is considered sort of ordinary income, if they have accumulated stock and it has increased in value, sometimes they can think about maybe a larger gift with that because of the tax savings. As you can see here, that the U.S. Census says that somewhere between 97 and 98% of the wealth held in this country is non-cash. So again, depending on who you are working with, there's a likelihood that, particularly if it's a major donor prospect, there's a high likelihood you're going to be working with someone who has some stock held in a portfolio. So again, as I mentioned a moment ago, donors are more willing to give out of their wealth, their accumulated wealth, than out of their what we call out-of-pocket or disposable income. So again, the final bullet here, that nonprofits actually encourage and accept that nonprofits that do accept stock gifts often see a revenue boost of up to 65% when not just accepting cash gifts.
I want to pause right there to, could you imagine seeing 65% of revenue growth simply by adopting this one small change in your fundraising strategy, moving away, not completely, but at least opening up the portal to other ways to give, like stock gifts? I know personally, when I was working in animal welfare, we saw revenue growth over 65%. We could have accomplished our capital campaign for a brand new shelter in half the time that it actually took us, which is incredible. And I'm sure others here on the call, and I'd actually love to hear from our attendees, what would a revenue growth of 65% mean for your organization? Does that mean actually new staff that you could bring on board? Does that mean you could invest more in different technology that can help you manage things like that? So the floor is definitely open to hear those commentary from our audience. Excellent. Well, now here's the fun part. We were alluding to this a little bit earlier, is we've got this really great base knowledge. We've answered kind of, the why. Why is it so important for us to accept it? Really, why is it really important for our nonprofit supporters to also give stock gifts? We've got the tax benefits, we've got the wealth. It's amazing. Like, that coupled together is really quite powerful for both parties. But here's where we're actually going to give you the really tactical, the 1, 2, 3s on how to actually accomplish this and start implementing accepting stock gifts at your organization. And Vance, this one's for you.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, so we just got done talking about the what and the why, which is so important because many organizations are not proactively unlocking this channel of stock donations. Number one, because of education. And so educating on the what and the why, I think, is so important. But another reason I see oftentimes is not just education, but intimidation. So it's not even just understanding the what and the why this is beneficial for donors and for your organization directly, but the how. So we aim to give you 4 easy steps to help you answer the question of how to fully unlock this channel. And you might be saying, oh, we do have stock donations, we do have a brokerage account, but likely it's not fully unlocked if it looks in the form of maybe just 1 or 2 stock donations a year. Really, the potential, like Stuart talked about, 80% of people have stocks, over 90% of wealth is represented in stock securities and non-cash assets. So the likely answer is that there's so much more room for you to grow in this space, which is really exciting for us as fundraisers, right? And as nonprofit leaders. And so we're gonna answer the how really quick here. So step one, really internal staffing needs to be in place to be able to track, manage, and steward stock gifts, right? So this is a coordinated effort across multiple teams, typically within an organization, not just development, but specifically accounting and finance teams need to be able to ensure they're up to speed, that this is going to be a channel unlocked, because there are specific IRS and tax implications in terms of the acknowledgement letters that you need to provide, the tax forms that you need to provide specifically for non-cash assets. And so development team could be fundraising for it, but if accounting and finance teams are not ready to be able to acknowledge it and send the right forms out, then that's going to impact the user experience for your donor, right? So you want to make sure everybody is on the same page. We talked about some things that you could be communicating, such as the tax advantages, to be able to promote this option as another incentive. And the cool thing about this is that when you educate your donors and your supporters about this, it actually comes off as like a service to them, because they're saving taxes while giving, as opposed to maybe even their mentality around giving from their checking and savings is a little bit different. And so it's really cool. It doesn't come off as salesy or as a solicitation, but more like a service to your donors, which has really great kind of results from there. You need to make sure that your CRM is tied into this to be able to record and acknowledge it directly. Obviously, you might be using something like a Virtuous, which they already have a notion of this within their platform, and we're tightly integrated with them. Overflow is with Virtuous in that, so that's really, really good. And then, like I said, the acknowledgement letter is actually different from a regular check gift or ACH debit credit gift. You actually have to put the stock symbol, you have to put the number of shares. You're not supposed to put the amount of value at that time. That's a nuance about non-cash charitable acknowledgement letters. And so all those things need to be aligned within your organization. We can go to the next slide. Step number 2, establish an investment policy. Okay, so this is important. It's going to differ from boards to boards, from bylaws to bylaws, because some organizations will receive securities and have some sort of holding or treasury strategy for it and reserves. And some organizations, actually, I'll go as far to say most organizations that we encounter want it to be liquidated immediately and then put into fiat, into the checking or savings account of the organization. There's not necessarily any right or wrong answer. You need to be working with your internal board, your bylaws, and your controllers within the company to make sure that it's at least consistent and communicated across the organization. So that's a really important step to make sure that you do. Step number 3, let's keep moving. Open up a brokerage account. That's a really important step. You cannot receive stock directly if you don't have a notion of a brokerage account. What happens is sometimes the donor will want to give stock, but if you don't have a way to receive stock seamlessly, if you don't have a brokerage account, then what's going to happen is that they might sell their stock and then give you like an ACH or wire transfer in or write a check. That's very, very bad. Why that's very, very bad is because they're going to give you a gift that's 37% less than they could have given you, right? Because they're going to be hit with capital gains tax when they sell that stock. And instead of maybe $100,000, they can only give you, let's say $70,000. Still a great gift, but it could have been $100,000, right? If they were able to transfer the stock directly. At Overflow, we make it super easy. We basically created the easy button for donating stock, where the donor can connect to their brokerage account, send you the stock directly, And we actually are able to open up brokerage accounts on your behalf if you don't want to mess around with having to do that. It is a bit of a process, right? You have to visit typically a branch directly, fill out a bunch of forms and things like that. That's a service that we provide that we could talk about offline. Step number 4, market it, right? Roll it out. Again, it's about education and reducing the amount of intimidation or inconvenience, right? You want to make sure that donate stock today is as prominent as your traditional ways to give. Isn't that interesting that where wealth is, like over 90% of wealth, sometimes we bury the give stock under an other ways to give page that nobody can find, or maybe it's in the footnotes and things like that. Why would we do that if actually most of wealth is stored in these non-cash assets? It should actually be at parity. And so we actually have a direct integration with Virtuous where if you sign on to Overflow, you can easily just drag in a widget into your current Virtuous instance if you use Virtuous Giving, where we make it really easy to make that give option really, really prominent so that people just know. At the end of the day, traditional ways of giving is not going away, but this is just increasing options so you can increase the opportunity that you have for any which donor. As Stuart said, if people consider giving a stock gift, it's likely going to be a more generous gift. And so this is not a cannibalization thing. If anything, this is going to unlock net new opportunities for you. Not everybody's going to do it, but for the people that it's right for, and if they do choose to do it, it could move the needle for your organization. We can go to the next slide.
And before I move on, I do want to make a note here too, offering stock gifts and making sure that it's very prominent on your donate or ways to give page is actually incredibly responsive. To your point, Vance, not everyone's going to do it, right? Not everyone is participating in some kind of stock exchange, but for those that do, and actually are a little bit more willing to part with stock as opposed to actual cash in their bank account, it's incredibly responsive. And really that's why we love stock giving so much, is because we're continuously to listen to our supporters and say, oh, we do the traditional, we do ACH, credit, debit, things like that. We've got the mobile wallet features now, but stock giving, that just takes it to a whole new level of really drilling into your supporters and seeing like what's best for them in terms of donating to your cause. So absolutely love that. These are all really great steps to implementing. This is a really new fundraising strategy for an org. And then you had a couple of things to share on crypto as well, which is always the like, ooh, crypto, it's exciting, but very scary.
Let's talk about crypto. So for donation purposes specifically, cryptocurrency acts very similarly to stock. It is considered a security by the government when it comes to donation purposes. There are some nuances to crypto though. So because the publicly traded stock market is a pretty liquid market, meaning that it's priced every day. It's backed by the SEC, essentially, and it's kind of a trusted, source of asset allocation across decades. There are certain things that are not needed when giving a stock donation, but there are certain things because crypto is so new that is needed if a donor is giving a crypto donation. For example, if the crypto donation is valued over $5,000, I mean, some people would argue that the crypto valuations are real time as well. But the way the government treats it is that if it's over $5,000, it actually needs an appraisal, an independent appraisal to be able to validate that if you want to actually properly take your charitable tax deduction. Many not-for-profit organizations don't do this or don't even know this, and so we try to educate people because if, a donor is audited and they didn't get that appraisal and they're, reporting over $5,000, they will get flagged for that. And so that's good to know as one of the nuances amongst several nuances that you should know about. But again, we spend all of our time making sure we're up to date on this. So you can always contact us offline to dig into that further. I also want to say this, crypto has been volatile, right? Ever since it launched, really in a big way in 2012. It's been very, very volatile. It goes up, it goes down. 2020, 2021, it had some of its biggest peaks. And then, recently it's had some valleys, right? But very similar to the stock market. It's just crypto has maybe larger ranges of volatility. I will say this, if you are considering crypto, Bitcoin, which is probably the most popular crypto asset, is up 75% since the beginning of the year. Okay, that is really significant to understand because you may have what they call Bitcoin bulls or people that are bullish on crypto right now, that are sitting on some significant gains. And if they're sitting on gains, you should make it available for them to give from their gains in the form of crypto if you want to capture that specific type of donor. Why are people bullish on crypto? Why is Bitcoin specifically really rising in this season? I don't know how much you're caught up, but there has been questions around the central banking system. There are several banks that have failed or that have had to be backstopped by the government. And that is causing more motivation for people all across America and all across the world to hedge against inflation, to hedge against that banking risk, and to store their assets in other things such as Bitcoin, right? This is not a new phenomenon. People have done this before with things like gold and other commodities. So the actual human behavior is not a new phenomenon, but Bitcoin is a new rising asset class that people are doing the strategy with. And so I don't know how much Bitcoin is going to be worth tomorrow or in a year or in 10 years. I have no idea. And this is not financial advice. But what I do know is the first principle truth stands that people that have wealth want to diversify and hedge against risks that will deteriorate their wealth. And that's why crypto and things like Bitcoin is going to be something that's pretty resilient and that you'll always have a subsegment of people that will probably have. And if a subsegment of your supporters have it, you should probably communicate ways they can give it if they want to be generous with it. So that's my note. That's my note on crypto, Kelly.
That's great. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you dropped in there too, that there's a lot of nuances when it comes to cryptocurrency. It sounds like it's something, obviously because it's relatively quite new in the way of giving, that there are a lot of niche things to understand, having certain tax documents, making sure that you don't reference, that number. Also that you have to get appraisals on things. These are items that I would have never known. So that's all really great information for our audience. And I do believe, Stuart, you had a really quick extra point that you wanted to make as well before we move on to other slides.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Kelly. On the gift acceptance policy, one of the line items was with the policy is a question that comes up often, depending on an organization, is what sort of stocks will we accept, right? Think about that. When I started out in fundraising, I worked for an organization called Catholic Relief Services. Well, the Catholic Church had certain guidelines that they put forth that said that there were certain stocks or certain corporate entities that they were not comfortable accepting money from. One that pops up often is money from the tobacco industry, right? And again, it could be any number of things. Back then, it was issues around. Another one was General Electric. Well, why? Because they make engines that are used in fighter planes, right? So and I just raise that because it could be an issue that comes up within your organization. You have to be very thoughtful about it, is my recommendation, because it can begin to lead down a little bit of a slippery slope. You do not want to be accepting stocks from organizations or companies that your mission is clearly opposed to. But at the same time, you also want to be cautious about having it too broad, because before you know it, there are few that you will be able to accept it from. So again, I just want to emphasize that is a question that could come up from leadership. And so be thoughtful about that and do what you believe you're most comfortable in doing.
Excellent points. And I think that even goes back to earlier points too, where I believe it was step one of just bringing everybody into this decision. It's going to impact a lot of departments. It's not as simple, of course, of just saying, yes, we accept stock gifts on our websites and on our giving pages. It is a very intentional decision on the behalf of the organization, where nuances like that, where it needs to perhaps be a written policy. Maybe it's something you actually need to get your board involved into that decision making too. That's a really great point as well, Stuart. Moving on, because I do want to allow a lot of time for questions. We've had quite a few come through. I did just want to wrap up with a few key takeaways from today's session. And Vance, thank you so much for including your email address. Stuart, if you feel comfort there, or if another email address is applicable for donor search, they can reach out with more questions after today's session. I encourage y'all to reach out to them. They are the experts. But accepting stock gifts and cryptocurrency is a really responsive way to offer your donors new and modern ways to contribute to your organization. And a couple of, just wanted to resurface a few of those bullet points that we saw earlier in today's presentation. Is of the 80% that has stock gifts, 20% of those donors will actually contribute those to an organization. So there's a really large gap there of really untapped potential donors that stock giving is the better way for them to give to your organization. Donating stock allows donors to bypass those capital gains taxes. Of course, there's some nuances to ensure that they can indeed donate the full amount without having to pay those taxes. So we want to be very careful and mindful there. And actively encouraging and accepting non-cash assets can increase your revenue growth over 65% than just accepting cash gifts. That's incredible. Again, if you're looking to really accelerate your fundraising here in the next coming years to perhaps apply it towards certain programs, maybe it is a capital campaign, really look and see if stock giving is an appropriate, intentional way to ask your donors to contribute, if it's appropriate for your organization. And then make the option of stock gifts present on your donate or ways to give webpage. I remember when I was a fundraiser, we definitely had as a footnote at the bottom of our website of like, donate today, and very small text, and stock gifts. So if it is something that your organization and your board is really behind, you really want to be a part of this as your new strategy going forward, make it very obvious, put it out there, put it on that donate page or ways to give page, make sure it's very clearly defined, and how they can go about it. And that way it's very clear, it's intentional, and your donors know exactly that they can give this alternative method. So we have a ton of questions coming through, which is amazing. If you have not yet dropped yours in the chat, now is a great time to do so. Let me see here. Let me scroll back up. We've had a few, and we'll start with this one, which is for both Stuart and Vance. What trends are you seeing with supporters giving stock donations in a down market?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll chime in really quick around this. So, in specifically the stock market and stock giving space, we're just seeing a shift in what stocks are being given. We actually see a lot of resiliency right now and people wanting to give. Here's the thing, overall meta, right? People want to give, okay? Especially in times of tragedy and times of downturns. Sometimes it actually has a surprising result where even more giving happens, right? So for example, March 2020, when COVID initially hit, we had one of our biggest giving months the world has ever seen, right? Because in times of tragedy inspires empathy. And similar in kind of economic downturns, there's increased empathy for one another. And there is this kind of first principle truth that giving is resilient. It's a core human need that we all want to participate in. But what's being given will shift, right? Based on, appreciated gains and gains that maybe not appreciated. Something to note is that appreciated gains are based on the cost basis. And so, for example, let's say crypto again as an example. If you bought Bitcoin in 2012, it doesn't matter if it's $60,000 or $20,000. You still have a lot of gains because you bought it for $1 in 2012. that's an extreme example, but the same principle applies to the stock market. And so while we're not seeing as many certain stocks, maybe certain tech growth stocks are down right now, and we don't see as many of those gifts coming through our platform. What we do see is a lot of energy stocks that are being given, because energy stocks in this economic environment are actually doing really, really well. And so really it's not about picking which ones are and predicting which ones you're going to be able to receive, but it's more providing the option and allowing your smart donors to be able to choose based on their situation what to give towards your organization.
Yeah, I would echo what Vance says. You should never make any assumptions regarding your donors' portfolio and how they might be weathering a particular time. Vance referenced the appreciation of stock. The stock market is from 2020, 3 years later, it's up 50%. And if we're dealing and you're working with people who have held stock for years and years, which will be the case in their stock, even though it's down 10 points since the beginning of the year, it may still be up 50 points from the time they bought it. So again, it's like playing the market, you never win. So just get in there, make your donors aware of it, and let them make that determination if it's a good financial move or not.
And speaking of awareness and asking your donors, this is a great question, is how do you even ask your friends or your potential donors if they have stocks or crypto to donate?
I'll give that to Stuart.
Okay, all right, I'll go first and then you can jump in. Yeah. So, as the statistics showed, that you can almost, and I hate to use the word assume, but when you're working with major donors, there's a high likelihood that they have a stock portfolio. They have some assets held in stocks. So just go in with that thought process. The other is, and you may find out, it's like asking a question, they may say, well, we don't. Well, that's the case, then you move on, but don't not address it if, or just don't not address the stock gift option. I think that going back to my fundraising days, they teach you early on, particularly as a major gift officer, there's a lesson number one when asking for a gift. And when you have gotten yourself to a position, whether you're meeting someone at their office or in their home or at the coffee shop, wherever it is, and you are at the point where you're going to ask for that gift. And there are different ways to do it, but a typical example is, Janet, we so appreciate all your support over the years, and we would like to invite you to consider a gift of $10,000 to save the children. Now, you see what I just did there? I stopped. I didn't say another word. Vance knows the deal too. Kelly knows the deal. At that point, you say nothing until the donor responds, okay? Now, once you've gotten an answer, and assuming it is a positive answer, yes, that would be something we would consider, which is often the answer, right? Yes, that is a gift we consider. Or, wow, that's more than we were thinking about this year. Whatever the answer is, that's where you have an opportunity to begin to talk about, well, as you consider this gift, which we're very appreciative of, have you ever thought about making a gift of stock? And that might open the door for them, their wheels start turning a little bit, right? And, oh, I didn't think, well, tell me more about that. At that point, my suggestion is, no, you don't get into all the details about what has to happen, but that you just highlight some of the value and say that I can get you some additional information on how we could help facilitate a stock gift for you. And that's how you do it. Just ask.
That's great. And Stuart, I remember being a fundraiser and talking to our major gift prospects, and especially our corporate sponsorship ones. It's really tough to just go into that conversation. It's like, and would you like to make a gift? And that's it. I am of the personality that's like, and here's 50 ways you can do it. It's so hard to fight that urge and just stop and let them respond. But just to make the ask alone is a challenge. And that is a great way to go about it. Let's see
I
here.
love that.
We have another question here too, is what advice do you have when it comes to engaging with and incorporating donor advised funds?
Yeah, so I love what everything is said. I think it's so much wisdom in how to make the ask, and even just making the ask and having confidence in that. Um, and so this donor advised fund question is a really good question because it's really connected to that, in terms of just getting people's appetite, interest first solidified, and then trusting your systems to be able to actually facilitate the intent, right? What you're really trying to do is once you lock in the intent, you want to now bridge the gap between intent and action. And that's where your systems, your websites, your teams all being aligned is going to be really crucial to drive that intent to action. And so there's different flows, right? So for major gift donors, for example, that's very white glove service typically. That's very much, they might want to handle things manually. They might want to include their financial advisor. They might not want to go through a website. And I think you have to acknowledge that, right? And make it easy, as easy as possible with that white glove service approach for major gift donors, especially if that gift is a 5, 6-figure, 7-figure gift, right? That makes a lot of sense. And a lot of times major gift donors are going to want to give from their donor advised fund. And so as you're even unpacking the conversation a little bit more and you lock in the intent around them wanting to give stock, they're in their minds might be thinking about their donor advised fund. The reality is that you should know that once they put the stock in their donor advised fund, it's already locked in and it has to be given for charitable purposes. And you're actually not going to receive it in stock. You're going to receive a check from their donor advised fund or their family foundation account, right? So while maybe they funded their donor advised fund with stocks and securities, the way that you're going to receive it is not directly through the security transferred into your brokerage account. You simply being educated on that and mentioning that, oh yeah, stocks, DAFs, things like that within the context of your conversation is going to maximize the opportunity of driving that intent to action. The other thing I would also say is be mindful of if it's not a major gift donor, right? But maybe they're a mid-level manager at their company, they get compensated in stock. It might not be a 6-figure gift, but maybe it's a 4 or 5-figure gift. And really the name of the game for them is they don't have a financial advisor. They might be a millennial, so everything is all about convenience. They just want a click of a button. That's when you point them to the more maybe appropriate pathway, which is hopefully a seamless experience on your gift page where they can just facilitate a stock donation directly or a donation from their DAF directly. So that's kind of how I would approach that.
Excellent. Let's see. I don't see any other questions coming through. Those are all really excellent questions. So thank you all for asking those today. Vance, Stuart, this was an absolutely informative session. I thank you both so much for coming on and taking time out of your very busy days to talk about this. I think that we've left our audience not only feeling much more confident and comfortable about stock gifts and why it's so important for both a donor and an organization, but really how to go about doing it, which is great, and really thinking about how we can involve others in our organization to make sure that this is a holistic effort and how it really is a responsive way to, invite your donors to give in a new and modern capacity. So I thank you both so very much for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you to everyone who has joined as well. Again, as just a quick recap, we will be sending out an email tomorrow with a copy of this recording. So if you had to leave or you would like to pass on this wonderful knowledge to others on your team, kind of get the buzz going about stock givings for your fundraising strategy, please feel free to do so. And then of course you have Stuart and Vance's information. So if you do have further questions, please feel free to email them. I am going to volunteer them that their inbox is now completely open for y'all to pile in all their questions. So, but again, gentlemen, thank you again so much. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.